Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here, School Transportation News. Super excited to have you on the podcast this week with us. And this episode is brought to you by Transfinder, the leader in school bus routing software. And we have a tech tip from our friends at Premier Wireless. They're talking Wi-Fi with ECF funding. So super excited to hear about that. Also, I have my super awesome editorial guru, chief of content, Mr. Ryan Gray. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello, Tony. Hello, nation. How's it going? Good to be back here. School's started most everywhere. Where it has not quite yet started is out in New York. And a little bit later, we're going to be speaking to one of those transportation supervisors out there, Joe Cervone at Sachem Central School District on Long Island.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Ryan and his editorial team worked really hard. We got that September issue out now. If you haven't checked it out, go to the stnonline.com website, click on magazine. You can also go down that right sidebar and click on the cover. We have our technology super users that we are featuring, and our own Taylor Hannon went out and interviewed Bryce Sunderland out in Ontario, California, talking about all the tech stack that he's using. Super interesting. So go check out the magazine, see who all the technology super users are. So that's good stuff, Ryan. And also talking about interesting technology, Ryan, Taylor, and I ventured out to the ACT Expo, which is basically talking all about new alternative energy technologies, clean technologies. We're really keeping an eye on the trends happening around EV, propane, CNG, just basically powertrain. There is a lot of new technology, and it had a lot of information for us to digest and kind of bring to you. Ryan, what were kind of your big takeaways from the show? I know you were visiting lots of different exhibitors, looking at new tech, infrastructure, all that good stuff.
Well, obviously, everyone's talking electric right now, and really ACT Expo, it's Advanced Clean Transportation Expo, produced every year down in Long Beach. You know, really have seen it follow the trend, and so many of the providers, I mean, Tony, I don't know, what 90% seem to be electric, and you have the big, large truck manufacturers. Of course, you have school bus. There's a couple new players on the school bus side of things. We got Green Power Motors, which was showing its new Beast school bus as they kind of try to go national with their electric vehicle. BYD, the Chinese company, is now in the school bus realm. And of course, we have the tried and true, if you will, the ones that have been around for a while. Bluebird, IC, Thomas, Lion Bus, you got to throw them in there. They really launched the electric school bus several years ago. So, you know, what jumped out to me is there's so many people, so many companies that kind of raise their hand when you're talking about, can you do electric school bus? We can do it. A lot of companies that have been around a long time, you know, I was mentioning the school bus manufacturers, Cummins, obviously they had a huge presence there. They are electrifying, working with Bluebird. Also, too, though, companies like Allison Transmission with this whole integrated drive axle, which is really becoming one of the big trends, these electric axles, electric drivetrains where they can work with an electric system, or, you know, Allison is positioning itself to be the electric drive for potentially school bus, certainly trucks. Seeing the same thing from companies like Meritor. And then we have a lot of brand new companies that are coming onto the scene that didn't exist a couple of years ago. A lot of VC money, venture capitalist money out there funding a lot of these endeavors. You know, heard a lot about financing electric school buses in addition to the grants. Just, you know, a lot there to chew on, and everyone's, you know, positioning themselves for a piece of the pie. We're talking billions of dollars for electric school bus, still awaiting final congressional approval of the infrastructure bill, as well as a 3.5 trillion kind of health aid package that the Democrats are pushing. So that's all coming to a head here. We should be knowing in the next couple of weeks and seeing that pass. You know, but when you're talking 20, 25, $30 billion for electric school buses, that's going to get people's attention. And so certainly that's one of the big things that jumped out at me from last week at ACT Expo, just how many people were talking school bus. And when the president CEO of Meritor ends his press conference talking about electric school buses and, eventually seeing electric school buses powered by rockets, I mean, that this industry has people's attention.
Yeah, that really caught me too, Ryan, that there were some big name players, but now at this point, right, the OEMs are not tied to these guys directly in some way, right? Like right now, obviously Bluebird is with the Cummins power plant. You've got, Thomas is Julie on the Proterra power plant, and you've got IC Bus, and they're obviously tied to Volkswagen, right? So they've got the parent company, which they were acquired by. So, they've got a single source solution. And now you have Allison, Meritor, and some of the other newer providers, like you said, like BYD and Green Power, and they've got some of their own proprietary technologies. And, I was even hearing words like blade batteries, like switching the battery tech to thinner, higher density batteries. I mean, geez, we're not even off the blocks with electric school buses, and there are already like Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4 technologies downstream where they're lightening the weight. I know you just talked about those drivetrain axles. And just to kind of put it in perspective, guys, that is a transmission. That's the drivetrain itself and the engine in one unit. And that removes an immense amount of weight and components from the bus. And if that application is used, it will significantly change how this industry operates, the ecosystem of it. So it's really interesting. We're keeping a really close eye on all this technology development. And then now you've also got infrastructure, right? The infrastructure bill, we're talking about charging units, right? Like I ran by a booth, Rhombus, which they make chargers for a lot of people, and they white label their chargers, to guys like Proterra or like Nuvi, right? And then they are talking about like having one unit that can tie 4 chargers together that will significantly reduce the cost of, say, trenching your parking lot. Because if you need to trench for each charger, now if you'll need to trench once for 4 chargers, wow, that significantly saves you on your build out. So it's just, how do you look at it? How do you take this on? And I know you're thinking like, wait, I'm in transportation. I'm just trying to get the kids from point A to point B, manage my staff safely. Am I looking to be like an energy consultant? What does that look like?
Well, and that was the gist of surprisingly, there was only one session about electric school buses. And that was the takeaway with that. So we had a representative from a utility down in Florida, but we also had Ron Halley, who's the vice president of Student Transportation of America, and he's really leading their EV implementation. And also Gilbert Rosas, who's the energy manager over at Stockton Unified School District in Northern California. And those folks talked about the communication that's necessary. Certainly, utilities are very important in this. They're vital, and knowing your utilities, having that relationship with them. But I was talking with Gil Rosas after the session. I was relaying to him a story that a transportation director not far from him in the Bay Area shared with me a couple of years ago, where they were going electric and thought all the ducks were in a row. The grant money was all in place, and then got a bill from the local utility about like, oh, well, then we also have to do this. And he was like, time out, wait a second, what? And it was, the conversation was getting the power to the yard, but then the conversation didn't go the next level of actually going through and breaking up the parking lot and going to the meters and, the actual chargers. And it just kind of like learning as you go. And Gilbert there at Stockton, really interestingly, he learned all this stuff. And amazingly, Stockton, in a span of 11 months, they applied for the grant, got the money, and got buses. They have 20 buses right now. There's soon to be 30 buses, so nearly a third of their fleet is electric, all in a span of less than 12 months. So, kind of giving everyone a sneak peek here at Reno coming up in December, we're going to have Gil. You heard it here first. He's going to come and talk about implementing electric school bus on a very fast time frame. It just, so much is involved with it. We were talking about everything. Yeah, it's great to see all these things out on the trade show floor, but really it comes down to how are we going to implement? And, there was some great information there shared by both Ron and Gil. So look over at stnonline.com. We'll have a report on that.
Yeah, Ryan. And also to kind of mention as well, catching up with some of the OEMs, I was doing some video interviews and I interviewed Nate Baggio, Vice President of Sales over there. He's Senior Vice President. Now he got promoted. So I want to be sure and share like those guys at Lion Electric at STN Expo in Reno, they're talking about having new vehicles no one has seen before, new tech. Right? Even at Green Power, when we walked by, they're like, this is the first time this bus is going to be seen. STN Expo, brand new technology, new things you're going to see. IC Bus, same thing. They have a production model ready. I did a ride and drive there at the conference at ACT Expo, got to experience it for myself. Super quiet. Randy Ray, who's Vice President of Sales over there, Sales Director, he gave me a quick tour. Ryan Kaufman, they were very gracious. And I really got to see and feel I got to see the really cool instrument cluster, all the electronics built in. And they're like, hey, this is the kind of product you're going to see at STN Expo in Reno. So I'm really excited to bring all this new tech to school transportation, to have you guys put your eyes on it, feel it, give it your experience. I also got on the Julie bus. Mark Childers over at Thomas Built Buses gave me a ride there. So I got to experience that and see what it was like on a Proterra, a little bit different technology platform, differences in the tech. Really interesting stuff. So I'm very curious how our audience responds. ACT Expo, there's really not any school districts there, right? It's a business to business conference where you're seeing a lot of companies interested in this. Other guys I saw, the guys at the Propane Education Research Council, right? Let's not forget about them. Low emissions, right? That's in that infrastructure bill, $2.5 billion projected for low emission school buses, which that's like secret code for propane, right? Because that's really the predominant source. You see maybe a little CNG, but really the vast majority of the tech is that's what we're looking at. So we talked to them. They talked about, hey, how many new school buses can you access that are propane with $2.5 billion? That's a lot of school buses because there's not as big of a valley in cost where EV has a much bigger valley relative to diesel, right? So it's very interesting how we're going to see things unfold here going into 2022. If all this funding hits, Ryan, man, it's going to be insane. Like, I am really excited to see what the industry does. It's just like, I don't think we've seen this much money. Was it 5x of what the annual spend is basically in this bill? Like it's, I don't even know how to digest that. How do school districts implement this in a timely fashion? So lot to learn, lot to see how this all kind of comes together.
Absolutely. And when I was over at the PERC booth, I was speaking with a propane provider up in Washington State, and kind of eye-opening to me. I know several years ago with propane, kind of the carrot was, hey, sign a contract with your propane provider, or for buying a certain amount of vehicles, and you'll get all the infrastructure for free. And certainly, there's not as much infrastructure as something like an electric or CNG, but still there's that capital cost. And I was under the impression that had kind of gone away. Well, this person told me, hey, let me know if there's anybody in California, Oregon, Washington State, Idaho, they want to go propane. We're putting that stuff in for free still. I mean, so, again, everybody is just, they're seeing all this money out there and they're ready to roll. They're ready to implement. And so there's just so many options and so many tools out there. Really, the other thing that jumped out at me was from ACT Expo, engage your partners, engage your fuel providers, research fuel providers, engage your utilities, talk to your OEMs, your dealers, talk to your neighboring school districts that have experience with these fuels and this energy. That's how we're going to really, move the needle. Yes, the money is there, but if we don't know what to do with it, it doesn't do us any good.
Yeah, Ryan, and talking about working with your partners, you guys may have heard that ECF, right? What's that stand for? It's that broadband connectivity thing. Maybe you caught it. FCC launched $7.17 billion. There was an application process that came and went, and then they make an announcement. Hey, there's a second window. That leads me to this week's tech tip from Premier Wireless, the expert in school bus technology solutions. Wi-Fi is everywhere except on the school bus. Premier's Connect Ed Bus Wi-Fi solution turns travel time into extended learning time by enabling students to study while riding the bus to and from school, making them better prepared for class and improving test scores. Plus, the Emergency Connectivity Fund provides the necessary funding to add Wi-Fi to your school buses. If you missed the first window, don't worry. There's a second application window opening September 28th and running through October 13th. Make sure and reach out to Premier Wireless today at 281-667-0400 or visit them online at premierwireless.com. All right, we got Ryan talking with Joe Cervone, Transportation Director at Sachem CSD, Long Island, New York.
Want to welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Joe Cervone. He's the Transportation Director out of Sachem Central School District on Long Island, New York. Joe, how's it going today?
Very well, thank you.
Well, like everyone, you are dealing with a little thing called the driver shortage. One contractor told us last week, it's not a driver shortage, it's a driver emergency. But you spoke with one of our reporters recently for the October issue, and you were saying that you there in Long Island don't have it quite as bad as some of your neighbors. What do you attribute that to?
Our work environment seems to be very positive. The drivers like working here. Coincidentally, I just had a conversation with a driver today that came in, wanted to apologize because she recommended some people from her previous employer who I wanted to hire, and then they were afraid to make the change. So she's like, oh, I didn't want to waste your time. But the other side of that is down there telling her, oh, I should have taken the job, and I want the job, and I wish I could be there. And I reached out to them and I said, when the next opening comes, you're in. I have three already on the back burner. I have three on the back burner that want to come here, and I don't have an opening yet. So that's why I say I'm one of the fortunate ones.
That's great. And so they're in New York. Obviously, it's a very heavily contracted part of the nation there in terms of school bus driving. So tell us about Sachem. So it's the second largest district on Long Island. So you have a very big service area. You're running a lot of routes. You have contractors, but then you also have some in-house routes. Kind of take us through that a little bit.
Correct. So we have over 12,000 students, and I have 10 schools. We have 2 high schools, 3 middle schools, and 10 elementaries. And we do 3 tiers. So we do our high school, then we do our middle schools, and then we do our elementary. So our bell times, we don't have time. We can't really adjust them. Like that's some of the things that people are doing, adjusting their bell times. We didn't. We were fortunate. Last year, we didn't really adjust much. We kept our routes pretty much the same, basically because the district went to an AB day and a lot of students went remote. So we didn't have that shortage, so to speak. There was a period, though, when we had 10 to almost 12 drivers in a week that were all on quarantining, So it's like, so even if you don't have a driver shortage during this pandemic, it still was affecting you somehow, Maybe not long term, but a week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be. But we work very well with our contractor. So, they would cover for us, we would cover for them. And they have a good staff, so we managed well.
Okay, and there's obviously a lot of complexities when simply contracting out all the routes, but you're not there. You actually are taking about 40 routes, I believe you told me earlier, kind of the shorter, closer routes, and then contracting out some of those longer ones. But in terms of that collaboration and that communication, because you are hiring your own drivers in-house, but then of course they're hiring theirs. What's that relationship like when you're going through a driver shortage and you're trying to work together and kind of get to the common good here? But, it's almost kind of like, are you guys competing with each other to a degree in trying to get drivers behind the seats?
Yes, we could be competing with each other. And there was a short period of time where I actually took 3 drivers in a row from my contractor, and maybe not from my contracted yard, but it's still the same company. So if I'm pulling from this yard, then he has to pull from same. We're pulling from the same company, and they actually called me and said, "Listen, you keep stealing my drivers," and I made a promise that I wouldn't take any more drivers. So fortunately, another avenue opened up. There's another. See, with a district, because we offer benefits, and you're in the New York State retirement package, that's why they want to come here.
Yeah.
So there's a neighboring district that's going through changes, and their drivers are looking to jump ship. And if they come here, they keep what they already have. So that's what I try to do, not take from my contractor and help people stay with their state retirement package,
Absolutely. And that's key right now. I'm reading articles that with especially, hourly workers benefits. And we've been hearing that for years, talking about the driver shortage and pay, of course, that's always at play. But it really seems to be those benefits are really what keep folks in that, proverbial and real tangible driver's seat.
Correct.
So let's talk about your routes a little bit. So you mentioned that you're not able to adjust bell times like a lot of your peers around the nation have done, and then especially, have been doing during this pandemic. How do you go about making that all happen? I know you guys are using a lot of technology to do that, but you guys are doing your own routing, and then of course the contractor's doing some routing. I understand you're trying to kind of bring that all under one umbrella.
Yes. So the routing that the contractor is doing is more for our special need vans, and that's unpredictable every year anyway, because that changes all the time where the students are going. So the amount of vans and routes you need fluctuates. So that doesn't concern me as much as some of the big buses, because now one driver is transporting a lot of 50 to 60 students, and so if you lost one driver, that's 50 students you left somewhere. If I lose one driver in a van, I have to figure out how to get 6 more students somewhere. So that's how we work it. You have to look outside the box and figure out what you can do. And that my staff does very well. They look outside the box.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So with your routing, you guys use Transfinder. They're in-house. Your contractor doesn't. And I know that, as you were saying, you want to bring everything under that one umbrella. Why do you want to have full control over routing? Why is it important for the school district to really take that on?
To effectively know which students are on which buses. And certainly you would want to know that if somebody has a missing child, right? At the end of the day, you get a phone call and my child hasn't come home. Do you know where they are, right? That is like the worst thing that could happen. And now you're frantic and you don't know. Like, I can't even pull up their route because it doesn't show on my map. It's not the same routing software. So, we have Transfinder. We've been using it a long time, and they perfected it very well here. And so our routes through Route Finder, we do not change from year to year. I came here 3 years ago. I have not rerouted anything in 3 years. I'm going my 4th opening. Yeah, you adjust. I have not rerouted not one route. They're the same. I have the same amount of routes, and I give them to the contractor and my drivers every year to year. And so, and we managed through the pandemic with Transfinder very well because it adjusted to our needs. We went to A/B days. We didn't have to adjust the routes. We just had to adjust the students that were on that day, So I find the software very easy to use, user friendly. I have a senior office assistant clerk and now another one that just got hired in November. Neither one of them knew Transfinder. So one's been here 3 years, going on 3 years. She taught herself, and now my second one, Linda, she's being taught herself also. They work. So it's a very user-friendly software. You just have to put the time in.
And going forward, what kind of needs are you identifying for transportation? Of course, everyone wants to be able to buy more buses or newer buses. But technology, are there any big ticket items that you are looking at implementing into the Sachem?
Yes, and because I came in at a good time, my yard was redone. My fleet is almost all brand new. We were on a 6-year changeover of our buses, so we have almost everyone is brand new now. So that is now pushing me to looking at interior technology as far as GPS or routing, attendance taking, and parent apps. So we don't have any of that in our district right now. And I keep telling people, this is coming. It's coming. Like, there are districts that are using it, and it's out there. But you see, technology just keeps speeding up, and 10 years ago, your kids didn't have a cell phone, but you did. Now everybody has a cell phone, I predict in the next 5 years, probably all these buses are going to be having some kind of parent apps. And so that's what I'm looking. That's what I'm focusing on as far as new technology goes.
Mm-hmm. I always hear the analogy that we can watch our pizza being made virtually and then watch the car going down the road as it's coming to our house to drop it off.
Yeah.
And we have that ability now in school buses.
Correct.
So definitely keep us in the loop there as you implement that.
Well, that's why I think it's going to come fast. And you could push it off as long as you think you can. But like you said, we're doing it for pizza. Why are we not doing it for our kids? So sooner or later, the community's going to push back and say, we want this, right?
So parents aren't actively asking for it yet?
No, not yet.
But you're trying to anticipate.
But I know they will. You hear it, and all you need to have is one neighboring district or somebody that's using it and it's very well, and then that's it. Boom, it takes off. So I'm trying to be ahead of it.
Oh, absolutely. Before I let you go, too, I want to ask, Ida, which was started as a hurricane down in the Gulf last week, came up and hit you guys pretty hard in the Northeast. How are you guys doing out there? A lot of flooding?
Fortunately, on most of Long Island didn't get hit severely. There are parts on the north shore of Long Island that got some flooding, and towards the city, if you're familiar with Long Island, but if you go west towards New York City, and New Jersey, they were, flooded like unbelievable. I have not heard of any horror stories within any of my colleagues yet, so looks like we all made it through. Our bus yards have made it through pretty well here.
Good for you guys. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so much with these storms too, people are losing power, and we're trying to reach out to folks down in Louisiana, of course. I mean, they're out of power, and the schools closed down again. And so we're trying to talk with the folks in New York City and New Jersey as well. So everybody stay safe out there. Seems like we're not quite out of the woods with this weather yet. But Joe, really appreciate you coming on. Really thank you for telling us about Sachem and what you're doing there.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, guys, that was an excellent interview. Really enjoyed that conversation. Hey, I want you guys to remember STN Expo Indianapolis coming up October 1st or the 5th. Online registration is closing September 10th, so there's not much time left. If you've waited, you can't wait any longer. We will do on-site registration, but we'd love to see you at the conference. I know maybe there's some stress out there with school startup, school bus driver shortages, emergency stuff going on. You got to take some time for professional development. It's super important. You network with your peers. You see the latest and greatest technology. Be sure to join us. Don't forget also Transporting Students with Disabilities, November 17th through the 22nd, as well as STN Expo in Reno, Nevada, December 4th through the 9th. Go to stnexpo.com for all the latest and greatest on how to sign up for the shows and take advantage of all that great professional development. Guys, this episode, it's been brought to you by Transfinder and also our friends at Premier Wireless. Be sure to check them out. Reach out to those guys. We couldn't do it without them on this episode. Also, go to stnonline.com for your latest news, information, analysis to check out that September issue all about technology. And be sure to rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go to stnpodcast.com. Share it with your friends, the transportation community. We need your guys' support. Build that listenership. We can't do it without you. Thank you so much for being with us on the podcast today. We love you, nation. Take care.